a few essential sounds in European Portuguese that are very difficult for English speakers to do because we don't use those sounds. But if you don't master them, you're not going to be sounding like a local anytime soon. So in today's video, I am finally going to explain what you should be doing with your mouth to make the very difficult sounds y, h, and r in Portuguese. I'm also going to give you my #1 tip that is going to make the whole process a lot easier. If you're excited for today's video, give me a like, and if more practical Portuguese lessons in plain English is what you are looking for, then make sure you subscribe to the channel as I have hours of content for you. Let's start with the big one that everybody hates, and that is y. Now, what I want you to think about in order to start getting your head around the concept of how this should sound, we basically want to combine the sounds l and y. But this is really important. This sound is actually called a digraph, where two consonants work together to make one single sound. So the biggest mistake people usually make of this is trying to make it into kind of two separate syllables. L-y, l-y. What we want to do is fuse those together into one sound. Yeah. So how do we actually do that? What I want you to do is visualize what your tongue should be doing at this point in time to make this sound. If this is the roof of your mouth and this is your tongue, we want the tip of the tongue to touch the roof of the mouth and then for the rest of the tongue to follow. So try it with me very slowly. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully with that kind of very slowed down version, you can see that that is what my tongue is doing. The tip is coming up and then it's followed by the middle part of the tongue. Yeah. Yeah. Now remember, we can't make this two separate sounds or two separate syllables. This is the mistake that most people make, so that words like filha become filia. Can you see how that went from 2 syllables when it's correct to 3 syllables when the LH isn't being done correctly? So the biggest tip that I usually give my students is to cut off the word into syllables and make sure that the L and the H stay together with the vowel that follows it. So if you were using the same word, you'd split it up like this. Fi-ya, fi-ya. And make sure you've only got 2 syllables in the whole word. So to practice this one, you can use words like trabalho, velho, alho. If you want an audio track to practice with, I have one waiting for you down in the description because this sound and 6 others are covered in my free pronunciation guide. It's a PDF and an audio track with drills so that you can practice these again and again and again until they are sounding perfect. So next, let's tackle the double R. Now there are 2 ways of doing this, and you can choose which one you are going to use based on which sound you find the easiest to produce, but just stay consistent with it, okay? Don't jump around using one and then the other. So the 2 options are h, which is the one I use, or r. Now, if you are choosing the h sound, this one is so difficult for English speakers to get right. So what I want you to do is just start by saying h, 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 like we would for the letter H, okay? You'll feel all the air moving up your throat. Then what you need to add is some friction in your throat. What we want is for that piece at the back of our throat here to vibrate. It's kind of like you're, preparing to get lots of saliva in your mouth. It's kind of disgusting, but you'll get used to it. So in the beginning, this will feel really exaggerated as you're forcing that sound, but as time goes on, it will get easier and easier, and you'll be able to say, The other option, if you perhaps already speak Spanish, might be easier because the trilled R is your other option. So essentially with this, we just want to make the tongue flap about as much as possible, and that vibration with the air coming through is what is going to make that sound. So you need to keep your tongue really loose and just force the air out. Okay? And again, with time, you won't have to put so much force behind it. You'll just be able to say r, So which one are you going to use? You can practice with words like garrafa, terra, correr. Now don't forget we also use this sound if a single R is at the beginning of a word. For example, rua. So get practicing with that one. Finally, the single R or the tapped R is often really overlooked when people are learning Portuguese because they think, well, I know how to say an R. But actually, this is another one of the things that is going to give you away as a newbie in Portuguese. So let's fix that. So I want you to go ahead and make the sound R as you would in English, the letter R. 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 Can you see or feel that your tongue is suspended in your mouth? It's not touching anywhere in your mouth. R, r. Now, in Portuguese, what we want to do with our tongue instead is give a little tap on the roof of the mouth. That's why it's called the tapped R. Now, you might be familiar with this if you are perhaps from Scotland and you say greet, gr, gr, gr. That's the sound we're going for. Or maybe if you are American and you say water, say it now and notice what your tongue is doing. It's doing that exact thing of doing a tap on the roof of the mouth. And that is the sound that we want. This can be a really, really difficult one for people to get their head around. So again, just keep practicing, especially if you're choosing to do the trilled R, for your doubles. All you need to do is just do it one single time, and that's your single R. So you can practice with words like caro, prato, presente. I also want you to pay attention when this R comes at the end of a word. For example, with a verb, falar. Now, what most people want to do is leave that word hanging and say falar or falar, and that's not what we want. We want to make sure we still do that little tap even at the end of words ending in an R, and this is why sometimes it feels like when the Portuguese speak there's almost an extra syllable there, but it's not, it's just the tapped R. So verbs like falar, comer, or the all-important phrase por favor. Can you hear that that tapped R is there at the end? If you can master that, you are going to sound so much more Portuguese. So what is my number one tip for making sure that you actually get these sounds right? It sounds obvious, but lots of people don't do this. What I want you to do is start by saying the sounds as slowly as possible so you can make sure you're doing them correctly. People usually want to emulate the way the Portuguese speak, which is very fast, dropping off syllables and sounds. But while you're learning, it's much more important to make sure that you are making the sounds correctly, and then you can speed them up later. Otherwise, you're missing a step and you're going to be speaking too fast and you're not actually creating the correct sound. So I always compare it when you are going to the gym and you're learning a new exercise. Your muscles don't really know what they are doing. So your PT will usually say that they would rather you did fewer reps, more slowly, but with the perfect form, because then with practice, muscle memory kicks in and you are able to do so much more. I hope that helped clear up how to make some of these most difficult Portuguese sounds. Don't forget, if you want an audio track to practice with, my free pronunciation guide is linked in the description. And if you want to go one step further, why not come along to my free lesson for beginners? It is the ultimate quick start guide that is going to give you the tools and strategies you need to speak like a local in Portugal. I'll be back next week with more tips and tutorials to power up your Portuguese, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Ciao for now.